we go again.
It's working. Okay,
It's
so
working.
I think this is going to be a pretty easy rank. I would hope so.
I think
I think
maybe.
so. So far, in everything you've talked to me about this, you've missed the point, and you're kind of a Debbie Downer on this movie. But you agree that it's fun. It's a
fun
as
movie.
hell movie.
But I'm being a Debbie Downer for like reasons down the road, not like reasons like this instant, this time.
Well, let's get one thing clear. I don't think Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine, is aiming to be some timeless classic on the level of Godfather, Gone with the Wind, blah, blah, blah.
Of course. But here's the thing. Anytime I make any sort of like, it's not just you, but anytime I say something about a movie and like wanting it to be the best it could be, people always throw that out. They're like, well, it's not trying to be Lawrence of Arabia, or it's not trying to be Citizen Kane. I get that, but there's something to be said about a movie being timeless versus a movie being of its time. And this is a movie that's like purposely being of its time, which to me just means, it's a cheap trick to get you to really like the movie. And it succeeds in that. And I think in some respects, it does a better job than some of its contemporaries as far as movies that have come out recently. But at the same time, I'm like sitting here just like everyone's enjoying this, like, oh man, this is great. I'm like, yeah, it was great. It's expired milk to me. It's like, it's going to expire at some point.
So normally I would
maybe
agree
not
with you.
in 10 years.
Normally I would say, you've heard me say before, I do not like movie references in any movie. Marvel does it here and there. Something that comes to mind is hey guys, Tony Stark, his dialogue is constantly just, clever quippy thing regarding some movie or, some old nostalgia thing. And I don't, they can be funny, but I don't like them really. As I'm always saying, you should aim for your movie to be worthy of reference rather than referencing things. Don't reference things, be worthy of reference. You've heard me say that a million times. The difference is that with Deadpool, that's his whole thing. Now, please explain to us, because you and I talked briefly about this today, something that we both agree on in the James Bond franchise is there's a joke made in the first movie where nobody understands it today. Therefore, it's just kind of a waste.
A lot of what my criticism, I wouldn't say complaints.
No, could you lay that out? Could you lay that out?
Sure.
In Dr.
My
No.
criticisms with this movie, and are you talking about Dr. No? So my criticism in relation to this movie is like, for instance, we talked very early on about Dr. No, and there is a reference in Dr. No that is lost to time because people don't understand the reference anymore. There's a scene where in Dr. No, where Bond is down in Dr. No's lair after Dr. No has invited him to dinner, and he's just waiting around before Dr. No comes in, and there's all this stuff everywhere. And one of the things that's there is this portrait, this painting. And he just kind of gives it like a weird kind of funny look like, huh. Yeah. And to modern audiences, like nobody gets the reference because it's like that reference is lost to time. No one's going to get that reference now unless you look it up. And so what it was is at the time there was a famous painting that was stolen. And after it was stolen, nobody knew what happened to it. And so they basically were making the in-joke of saying, Dr. No stole the painting. And that's what was funny about it at the time. Nowadays, people look at that one sequence and go, what? About? And then they'd have to go and look it up and be like, okay, that's what that is. And then but in relations to this film, there are a lot of references that, there's fun Easter eggs. But like there are a lot of references to things that are only going to be prevalent like in this time period. And so when this movie goes down the line 20 years from now, there's a lot of references I think are going to be lost on people where they're going to might have to go back and look it up, or maybe they just like, that was kind of funny, but not really know the insider meaning. And it's just going to be something where you're going to have some sort of podcast show. People will be like, that's what that was about. And I'm talking about way down the line. Like I'm talking about maybe 30.
Okay, here's where I disagree. Here's where normally I would agree. You and I agree on the Dr. No front that was a bad call. They weren't keeping the future in mind. And you should, if you're going to take yourself seriously as a storyteller, you should be keeping the future in mind. The only difference here, like I said, Tony Stark making movie references is kind of annoying to me. I get it. I get why they do it. We've talked about Tarantino a lot. Tarantino pops off and suddenly everybody thinks, oh, I'll do that. I know a lot about movies. I'll put all these references in my movie, and that's really clever, right? No, it just dates your stuff. The difference here is that, because I think before I saw the movie, you painted a picture using Scary Movie, where if you watch Scary Movie, kids watching Scary Movie today might go, what is this joke? Why is all of a sudden everybody playing with basketballs or something? And so those jokes, those are, you are required to know the reference. The only difference here, this is the important part. This is what you need to know about Deadpool. Not only is his shtick making a joke of everything and being irreverent and making references and stuff, that's not only is that his character, but then the movie is completely within his character. But here's the important part. He doesn't rely on these jokes that you need to know some commercial from the 90s or something. The information you need to know, and this is where it is targeted towards you and I. We are the generation that this movie is targeting specifically because you and I were, 10, 11, 12 when superhero movies popped off. Some people will say with Blade. It was not Blade. Blade was made for adults. It was with X-Men because X-Men, everybody could watch X-Men. Did I lose you? Why did I lose you? I was just on a roll, McCurdy, and now you're gone. Happy Monday. Well, I'm just going to keep talking. So the very important thing with is that this movie is specifically a love letter to the entirety of the Marveldom. So it's not like references are going to be lost on people. This movie assumes that you've seen everything from the very first X-Men. You've seen all the awful movies, the flops, the characters that never got a send-off. The movie is assuming that you know all these things, and it's no different than. Let me back up because have you been hearing me?
Yeah, I have. But you're going on and talking about
hang on, let me finish.
I know
let me finish.
I know that it's a love letter to all of the Fox.
But let me finish. What I'm getting at is your argument being that you need to know all these things is literally no different from Endgame. With Endgame, you need to have watched 30 movies leading up to it. This is why we're in Marvel fatigue now, because you need to know everything. But what I'm saying specifically is that this movie is specifically Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Feige tying up all the loose ends, by bringing in Elektra, a flop, by bringing in Blade, who had a flop of a third movie and therefore never had a send-off, bringing back Pyro, bringing back all, let's have Channing Tatum finally do his Gambit movie, and tying up all these loose ends while being in the void. The void in the Loki show was just where anomalies went to just be imprisoned and die off. Here, the void is representative of all the trash that Marvel has created, where making jokes about how Chris Evans is the beloved Captain America, but he's also the embarrassingly bad Johnny Storm or whatever from, the Flame On joke was right on point. So my point being that yes, it's a love letter, but it's not like it's referencing lame commercials from the 90s. It's self-referencing, and that's because it's built upon all of the embarrassing flops that Marvel has generated, the countless misses that occurred until they finally got it going with the MCU. That's the whole shtick. And so I think it's kind of, it's a genius within its own right. It's its own brand of genius in that sense. And it's not just doing the Scary Movie thing where Weth Up, where if you don't know the Weth Up commercial, you don't get the joke. That doesn't really happen here because it's self-contained within the Marvel universe.
here's the thing. I don't disagree with you, but I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but like, that's also my point is like, yeah, but that's the same point I'm making, is that regardless of it being like because the part of it is, if you know, because I think there were some people that maybe are unaware that Marvel, prior to the MCU becoming a thing, wasn't necessarily under the same umbrella, and it still isn't completely, because Sony owns a part of it as far as the film universe goes. So this movie is kind of like, if you're a super fan, you know, oh, well, Fox owned all the X-Men characters and all the Fantastic Four characters. And I think Blade, was under New Line Cinemas, which doesn't really matter that much. But just to, like, people who are aware, they're like, oh, well, these are all the Marvel things that are like connected to this other thing that was going on prior to them entering the MCU. Like, and that's why I'm saying is like, I get that it's a love letter. I get that it makes sense within the universe. The only character that this works with is Deadpool. That's all great. But at the end of the day, years from now, this is just going to be what I also even said in like one of my little reviews that I wrote, was like, this movie is the Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein of the MCU, because Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein was a film that came out much later after all of the other films had come out. It was basically a comedy. It pokes fun at all of what was funny about all the previous films, what people enjoyed about those movies, but also brought back a bunch of actors that they hadn't seen in a long time. So specifically, Bela Lugosi comes back to play Dracula. He had only played Dracula once in his career prior to that, which most people find baffling, because they think, oh, Bela Lugosi's Dracula. And so then you find that it's like kind of in the same vein, where you could make the comparison to Hugh Jackman coming back for Wolverine, or someone like Channing Tatum, or any of the other actors like Jennifer Garner playing Elektra, coming back to reprise the role that they may have played once or twice, and it's just kind of a fun, cheeky, like, oh, ha ha ha, this person's back kind of thing. And again, they also did it with Lon Chaney Jr. in the Abbott Costello movie. So like, my point is that it's not, again, when I say I enjoyed it, I liked it, that's the hard part. Is like, you expressing nuance of opinion on the internet, people just think, oh, I hated the thing. I'm like, I didn't hate the movie.
How dare you be critical of something? You must want it to be dead.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, I have this nuance of opinion, because I'm like, I'm looking at it from afar on the sidelines going like, yeah, you and everybody else is like, this is the greatest thing ever. And I'm just sitting here
but you're doing the opposite. You're doing the opposite. Me saying that the movie is really good, now you're saying, oh, Charlie, you're saying it's the best thing ever. Did I ever say it's the best thing ever? It is the best Deadpool movie ever made. Within Deadpool,
I'm being hyperbolic. Charlie, to be fair, I'm being hyperbolic. Being hyperbolic when I say you're saying it's the best thing ever.
You're accusing people of being hyperbolic of you while being hyperbolic of me.
Right. No, I'm being hyperbolic in that statement. Just to be clear, I know you didn't say that.
Let me draw a comparison. Allow me to draw a comparison, because I have said any post-Endgame movies that we have covered, I've been very critical of, because I think the multiverse is a bad call. I don't like it. I think it cheapens everything it touches, and in a weird, really funny way, that's why I like this. This is another example of doing it well. The Spider-Man, not the animated ones. I thought the second one did multiverse poorly, the way you shouldn't do it. The first one did it perfectly. No Way Home did it perfectly. Those are probably the two that I actually appreciate the multiverse, and then maybe even like throw Loki in there just because it's this oddball. But,
I think the first season of Loki is
actually
pretty good.
Specifically, what Spider-Man did, though, was that it suddenly, out of the blue, it's like, hey, remember all those old Spider-Man movies? They're part of the MCU now. We just pulled them in, which I thought was kind of a genius move. It's very odd. It's very meta, but it works. It's a genius move. And then they take it so far where there's like thousands of Spider-Mans, and the entire, all of existence depends on Spider-Man. Stupid, can of worms, blah, blah, blah. But my point being that Deadpool just did the same thing. Deadpool just drew Blade in. Deadpool just drew in Elektra. But not necessarily because they're good, and it's like everybody loves the Tobey Maguire and the Amazing Spider-Man movies, so let's pull them in here. Let's invite them to the party. Let's bring them in because they suck. Let's bring in all the loose ends and the dirt and the dog crap.
The one
from
aspect of
decades of film studios crapping on Marvel.
Which is the one aspect I enjoyed that I had mentioned this. I had mentioned this when I even said the review, my nuanced review of this movie, when I'm being critical of the movie. The one thing I did appreciate, and even after I thought of the theater, I'm like, yeah, actually, like there's a part of me that's being a little cynical. I'm like, well, isn't this movie doing what other films in this multiverse era had already done? Because I don't know if you saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but there's a very similar way in which they kind of brought in these other characters, where at one point Doctor Strange goes to a universe where he meets this group called the Illuminati, which is a group in the Marvel universe that collects like all the top geniuses in the Marvel superheroes are all together, including Professor Xavier from the X-Men, which we at that point hadn't seen the X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that was really cool. So in this version, you said you saw it was almost like beat for beat kind of the same thing. You get Professor Xavier. We got Anson Mounts coming back as Black Bolt from the failed Inhumans television show. We also got, I think, a different version of Baron Zemo. Not Baron Zemo. There's a couple. It doesn't matter. You just got a couple of different iterations of other characters that we had seen that'd be like, oh, that's cool. We actually see them on screen here. And the thing that I think at least Deadpool and Wolverine did better is that they actually gave those characters a chance. We actually got them to see something, do something. Whereas in that movie, they show up for a second and then Scarlet Witch kills them all. And you're like, okay, that was a letdown. Like I wanted to actually see something out of these characters that you teased me. This movie at least is tease you, please you, where it's like we get Gambit, we see Blade, we see Elektra.
Let's give the people what they want. Let's finally give the people what they've been asking for years, including having Wolverine look like Wolverine. Like just having, like because for some reason there's always this worry that people will kind of crap on your movie because if you put Wolverine in the cartoon Wolverine outfit, he'll look ridiculous. And so they're afraid to do it. They don't do it, even though the fans may say that. And I'm not saying that it's a good call or a bad call. What I'm saying is that when suddenly now you're in a comedy, now you can do it because it doesn't matter if it's ridiculous because it is ridiculous and so it works. But in the serious X-Men movie, they didn't have them wear those ridiculous outfits. They have more balls to do the thing that they never did before in a comedy because it's absurd.
My point, though, that I was getting at is I was actually worried going into this that they're teased all these characters and then that they were going to get killed very quickly because Deadpool had done the same joke in the last movie where he introduces the X-Force, and it's all these characters from X-Men Marvel that are a part of these alternate teams that were from the comics with Deadpool. So I was like, I hope they just don't have these guys come out and get their asses beat really quick as a quick joke. I was actually pleasantly surprised to actually see them like hold their own in a fight, and it was kind of like the last stand. I'm like, hey, let's actually get some of these characters to get one last hurrah, and one at least didn't even get that at all. And it was fun that at least Channing Tatum got to do his Gambit and things like that.
And overdo it.
Like I said, I enjoyed the movie.
Overdoing it was so good.
I mean, they had the sky's the limit with that character because nobody had expectations for Gambit because we never saw a Gambit movie.
Can you tell me though? Can you tell me why? Gambit, was it in the works and it didn't work out? I don't know the story of the Gambit movie.
This is also the fact that Gambit's in this movie is another one of those like reasonings why I'm somewhat critical of the movie. As well as everyone's enjoying it, I'm like, yes, it's great, but now like when we go down the line, people are going to ask that question and be like, "What's up with this Gambit thing?"
I don't think they will, though.
Have to sit there and explain you.
I don't think it needs to be
because
explained.
Even the movies like references it.
I don't know the backstory, but it was still fun. So I don't know the backstory.
There was a point when right around it was before a lot of these movies had come out. So Avengers had come out. They were MCU was gearing up to do Endgame, and they had a bunch of movies. And it was basically when the MCU was at its zenith, when they were doing like every movie came out, they were doing no wrong, everyone was doing great. So all these other studios, specifically Sony and Fox, that were like, well, we want to do the multiverse thing too. We want to basically have all these movies that are all interconnected and stuff. So Sony had their Spider-Man movies. And if you remember the last of the Amazing Spider-Man films with Andrew Garfield, they were teasing up for a Sinister Six movie. They were going to have Doc Ock and the Vulture and all these other characters that they had touched. And obviously because that movie did so poorly, they didn't really go that route. At the same time, Fox had introduced, this is prior to the movies coming out, they were going to do they had a Fantastic Four movie that was on their slate. It came out. It did poorly for a lot of reasons, mainly because between the director and the studio weren't seeing eye to eye on what the property was supposed to be.
It's an amazing movie.
It kind of ended up being, it's an amazing movie to watch just because how poorly it came out. But basically you could say it was kind of, he wanted it more to be a body horror film. Studio still wanted a superhero movie.
Yeah.
And what they ended up was something kind of in between that really didn't work. And you can tell because they slashed the runtime to like 90 minutes. That came out. But before that movie had come out, they were already announcing the next X-Men movie, which was going to kind of take all those characters from Days of Future Past that they had introduced, and they were going to have their own adventure essentially. So it was going to be a sequel to First Class and Days of Future Past, which ended up becoming Apocalypse. And then I think Dark Phoenix was going to come after that, which it did. But they were even like teasing the idea that Fantastic Four, those X-Men characters, and a Channing Tatum Gambit movie, which they had brought Channing Tatum to Comic-Con to announce that they were doing this. And they were going to be like, yeah, this is going to be the Fox Marvel universe where we're going to have Fantastic Four, X-Men characters interacting. And so people were like, there was no movie announced that they were going to be a team up or anything like that, but they had basically said, we're laying this groundwork down. They didn't have a story. And this is also around the same time when Universal's doing the Dark Universe, and they're making their announcements that they're going to have the Mummy, and they're going to have a new Dracula and all these other things. And then they had Tom Cruise and all these actors doing these photo shoots where they were like, yeah, we're announcing our new multiverse, our new series.
Even if it would have been terrible, I want it to have existed. I hate that they canceled it.
But at the same time, it was literally just like a studio announcing, hey, this is what we're doing, but never following through because the first movie bombed. And that was basically what happened. So the Fantastic Four movie did really poorly. The person that they ended up getting to direct, I think it was either Dark Phoenix. He was like one of the writers on those films. He bounced up to direct. That movie did poorly, both Apocalypse and the follow-up Dark Phoenix. And then they just decided that they were going to quietly get rid of the Channing Tatum movie. All that happens, and then Marvel decides, or 20th Century Fox decides to basically split their company, and they were going to sell News Corp's like, okay, we're just selling all of 20th Century Fox to Disney. And then it was just like, yeah, that whole thing disappeared. It was just kind of one of those big failures. And that's why there's a lot of references to that in this movie where you see the 20th Century Fox logo in the sand. There's a mention of like, oh, yeah, things that never came to be. It's basically what Deadpool's referring to as Channing Tatum never getting the chance to play that character.
So that stuff, I like the stuff about the people in the void.
That's kind of the general what's going on with that.
I like the people in the void, but when it comes to the Disney and Fox references, that's where I'll agree with you that it's funny now, but it's not going to make that much sense in the future. We agree there. But the movie mostly leans into the tying up the loose ends of Marvel. And it being this love letter. And that stuff does work. I don't think you don't lose timelessness because it includes Elektra and Blade and all that stuff. And the movie is assuming, and that's why I say that it's perfect for, it is us. It is you and me who were 10 years old when X-Men came out, and we watched through the so like X-Men ignites the whole thing, and then you and I watch as they slowly try to make everything one by one and fail here and there spectacularly, like Daredevil. Everybody,
but the mindset was just the general
spawned Elektra, and then Ryan Reynolds himself gets put through the ringer.
Spider-Man the same time we got the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man, we also got the Ang Lee Hulk, or we got the Daredevil movie, which wasn't very good, but then we had the couple of X-Men films we had.
So this reaches out and gives a hug to all of those. And I mean, I love the moment. One of the more clever moments was when Pyro came back in and he starts giving a speech and Wolverine punches him out and says, not everybody gets a speech. And the joke being that, okay, we're giving you all a send-off, but you're not as important as the rest of us, And so it is meta, but it works because it's all within Marvel. Now, when you start talking about Disney and Fox, that's where you and I agree. That's where that is closer to the Dr. No painting than it is to the other clever Marvel stuff.
And there are other ones that are like that. Like one and the other ones, other jokes that are in there, they're like, that I'm thinking of, like when Jennifer Gardner says something, where Deadpool says something like, oh, I'm sorry about Daredevil. She's like, oh, that's fine. Like, don't worry about it. And it's like a in joke where it's like, I don't know if people are going to remember this later down the line, but they're going to be like, oh, that's right. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Gardner got married shortly after Daredevil. Then they got divorced more recently.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, so there's a divorce joke in there, but maybe the audience isn't going to get that years down the road. There's also another reference where Blade says something to Deadpool, and Deadpool says, oh, I know you never really liked me. And that's a joke to the fact that when they were making the last Blade movie, apparently Ryan Reynolds, who's also in that movie, who plays a different character, then I guess Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds didn't get along on set, and of course they probably squashed their beef. And it's like, oh, this is the fun of the thing. But I can't help but think this movie is the modern version of like that Abbott Costello Frankenstein, but I could think of other movies from like the 70s and 60s that are just
I would assume,
like, let's bring all these characters and it's fun to do this. Like think of a movie like we mentioned this in one of our series, was like Cannonball Run with which is essentially like Smokey and the Bandits, but with all these different colorful characters, and then so happens to have Roger Moore playing a James Bond type character. They don't say he's James Bond, but you were like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He's playing James Bond in this in this thing, and it's kind of like that. I'm saying like this is the modern version of that, in a way, where it's like audiences are going to go see it. We're going to enjoy it, and again, like I said, I did enjoy this movie. I liked this movie.
But so far as a list is concerned, it could in my book. I'll get it started. In my book, it easily beats out 2 and 3, but Inside Out 2 it's dripping in meaning. It is too meaningful and therefore timeless to give it to something like, for all we've been saying, where you're cynical.
Where I would put it.
Yeah, because Dune,
I'm just
apathetic towards Dune. I'm not apathetic towards Deadpool, because even though you're right about, like, again, we can go back and forth all day about jokes that land in the bin of, this is Marvel in universe, and I like those because, again, it's assuming you've seen all the Marvel movies, which I think is good. The ones you're pointing out are assuming that you've been reading the tabloids for the last 30 years that give you the inside scoop on inside jokes that, even on this show, you'll throw out an inside joke, and I'm like, McCurdy, nobody knows what you're talking about. It's between you and me.
I only do it
it's the same thing.
I only do it to make you laugh.
I know. So,
that's the only reason.
So we could, what I'm getting at is we could go back and forth all day on that. I think the movie mostly leans into the in-universe jokes, but we agree that there's some here and there. I mean, every time that he would refer to Disney, like there was that one moment where he ran over to the camera and said like, F you, Fox, something like that. And it's like, okay, I understand why those exist, and it's Deadpool. If they were in any other movie, I would immediately hate the movie. But with Deadpool, that's a shtick. It works. But what I'm getting at is, even in its emotional moments, even when it does drop the jokes and get serious, it's still better than Dune. I actually care. I actually am rooting for Wade Wilson as he's stapling a toupee to his head and trying to find meaning in his life, and is considering, I don't know, I think he's kind of considering eating a bullet, but I guess if he did, he would just regenerate.
He can't.
So he can't die, and yet he doesn't have any. All the,
which I will say, they even do that with Wolverine. Like you're getting at all that stuff. It's like they even give this because they even say that out loud. They're like, look, this isn't the Wolverine from Logan, and they make that joke where you have like 5 different versions of Wolverine from different iterations from the comics, as well as even throwing in that Henry Cavill Wolverine as like a, hey, maybe he's going to be the next Wolverine kind of joke. But they even give this version of Wolverine a like some sort of core story where he's like, yeah, you failed your universe, and this was the second chance for you to do something meaningful with your life. So I do think the movie has like a very vanilla story. Like it's there. It's not like over the top, because it's like, well, we have all these jokes. We don't want to make it too serious. So it's like, it's there. But yeah, I am agreeing. I would say, Deadpool for me, the ranking of this movie,
you agree with the list.
Is definitely under. It's under
I already
Inside
threw
Out
it in.
2. I think it's the better movie.
I already threw it in. It's at 2.
Fantastic.
But okay, so
great.
What this is it is in a meta sense, it's Ryan Reynolds finally getting just complete control to just go buck wild all over Marvel's face. At the same time, it is Deadpool teaming up with his idol, because we've seen him kind of have idol worship of Wolverine in the past, because he's the ultimate mutant.
I think they mentioned
he would never be able to get him in his movie, right? But now it's doing the thing that you and I both can't stand, which is, for the love of God, just give a character a good send-off and be done with it. Don't, Michael Jordan, stop coming out of retirement. Old, anything. Stop coming out of retirement, and then they find a way to justify it, and they do it. I mean, that's where Tarantino, I'm only going to make 10 movies, and then I'm going to retire, and a lot of people have an issue with that. And I kind of have respect for that, but then again, it's like the young rock star who's like, old people are dumb, and I'd rather be dead. I hope I die before I get old, is the line from The Who. And then all the guys from The Who are old now. And it's because when is the day where you wake up and decide, okay, I'm old enough now to end it? You know,
that feels like a Deadpool segment. That feels like a Deadpool segment where, this is my ADHD pitch brain going to you right now, but it would be a great Deadpool segment if you heard that lyric, and then Deadpool just stepped out and then found the Who just sitting around drinking coffee, and then be like, "Hey guys, hey, yeah," just be like, "Hey, you said these words back in the '60s. You said this. Now I have to, like, I'm sorry, but you're old now, so I do have to kill you." So
what I'm getting at though is they then do that thing. They bring back Wolverine, even though he had one of the best send-offs in superhero movie history.
Sure.
Who would the top be? I think I immediately go to Captain America.
Tony
Stark's was cool. Yeah, I think Captain America probably had the best, even better than Tony Stark.
I actually did like I think Logan's is my favorite, actually.
Okay, so it's like, are there any others? What other send-offs can you think of?
You could say Christian Bale's Batman, because if you had The Dark Knight Rises, does kind of end. It does end in a way that's like. And I know people complain about that movie for this and that and the other thing, but like at the end of the day, it was like Nolan came in saying, "Hey, we're going to tell this Batman story, but it's just going to be this. It's not going to be a giant prolonged comic book thing," which I do like, but it was like, no, this is just my version of Gotham. This is kind of more of a personal. This is the Bruce Wayne story. And it rises and falls, and it like has callbacks to stuff from Batman Begins, and I think it's also pretty good.
This is funny. This comment from K1 is written in your voice. K1 says, "I didn't hate the movie, but when I start to talk about it with people, they think I hate it." That's you. Like
exactly
the moment you're critical of it.
Exactly.
You just hate Goldfinger. You know.
But it's any movie. I swear, any movie that I have some criticism over. And I'll have a lot of points to it that people are like, "Oh, you must really not like this movie." I'm like, I didn't dislike the movie. Like,
had a lot of
you
fun.
can have a gray opinion on films. I do all the time. There's a lot of movies I go into and I'll watch and I'll go, "Yeah, I liked it. I wanted to say I liked it, but like there were these things that made me not like it as much. But there's parts and aspects of it that I really enjoyed." So that's where you have to kind of weigh in where you think the movie is.
So like I think I capped off what I was saying, but basically them bringing back Logan is it could only work in this if they did it with like, okay, what's going on with Robert Downey Jr. coming back to the MCU is already it's an admission that they have nothing. It is an admission that they're just trying to keep this corpse alive, even though it died with Endgame.
Well, they don't even know.
Logan,
we don't know
if they bring
what
back
that means
Logan
yet.
and
That's
anything else, that will ruin it. You can do it here especially because the movie begins with literally digging up his adamantium infused corpse, his skeleton,
right.
which is perfect. It is the Abbott and Costello treatment, but it works so well, especially because you don't need to watch this movie. Logan works on its own, but this does that thing that, again, in any other context I can't stand, which is, oh, who cares about the end of Logan because there's an unlimited amount of Logans. And all it does is usher in this ridiculous narrative nihilism to every movie you make. Anytime there's anything meaningful that happens, it actually is meaningless because there's an unlimited amount of Spider-Mans. And I hate it. And so obviously, that being said, I loved the moment in this movie where Deadpool takes a time out to do a quick little, recap on how basically he's like, ever since Endgame, everything's gone downhill. Nobody likes the MCU right now, and this whole multiverse thing was a bad call. I'm the guy in the theater being like, yeah, seconded. I appreciate that. But again, all this stuff works in this one movie, and then I'm kind of like, I said that, the MCU, it's like Endgame, anything past Endgame is pointless other than you just watch Spider-Man as a dessert. And then maybe you watch this. And then there's no reason to watch anything else because it's just gotten too redonkulous and nihilistic and meaningless. And that's obviously always been my shtick. The moment you lose the meaning and you just have explosions, I don't care. So I think it perfectly, just to recap this, I think so far this list is dead on. Inside Out 2 just has it's just way too meaningful to not be at the top. Deadpool and Wolverine is fun as hell and it's so much of a love letter to Marvel that they have a montage at the end set to Time of Your Life.
Behind the scenes.
But it's all
the behind. And apparently it's a
any
reference
90s
to something
kid,
else.
Time of Your Life is like the song they play to the end of school year montage,
Right.
So,
I know that. I'm
spot
saying
on.
like, I think there was like I think I did read like that ending was a meta reference to another movie entirely or a movie or something where they did the exact same thing where they just showed a bunch of behind the scenes clips of the thing as they were watching it. Yeah. It's just,
but it was the two of them. It was specifically Ryan Reynolds he's had a rougher ride than any actor through Marvel. Probably like him, and then Chris Evans just had like a weird, tenure. But definitely Ryan Reynolds because he had all these roles, and then and they were all just horrible. And then finally, Deadpool was where he just could come in and be the clown that he is.
What other roles are you talking about with Blade?
Blade Trinity, and then he was also the original Deadpool in X-Men Origins.
Yeah, because he was going to be. Yeah, that was where it all started. It's like everyone, and even in the comics, they were like Ryan Reynolds should play Deadpool. Even this was back when like he was just known as Van Wilder at the time.
Yeah,
and then he came in and he did that film, and then Van Wilder, whatever. Oh yeah, they make that reference or something in the movie. In the movie, yeah. But like after that, then they were like, they did the Wolverine Origins movie, and that movie was very botched, and kind of showed that movie in itself was kind of showing how Fox very much botched the entire take on X-Men because they were too hung up on this idea that Bryan Singer had instilled, where like, oh no, we need to try to take this seriously. It can't be the comic books. And Kevin Feige comes in and was like, no, it should be the comic books. That's why people like to watch these things. And this movie, of course, is showing like, yeah, this is the comic books. This is what you want to see. I will also admit that like out of the X-Men films, I always enjoyed how the Deadpool takes on them did a closer job of what I thought the X-Men should be in those movies. With the X-Men characters that they would bring in. So they'd brought in Colossus, they had brought in Negasonic Teenager and like a couple other characters, but their designs were always like, yeah, that costume's what we should have seen in some of these other X-Men movies. But for some reason, somebody said, oh, we can't do that or we shouldn't do that. And like,
that's what I was saying earlier.
Not?
People will think it's ridiculous.
Why not?
Well, then once it's a comedy, you can be as ridiculous as you want.
But
then you end up in a backwards way giving the fans what they always wanted. That's the thing. This is Ryan Reynolds is making a list of what ifs. And then by doing so, again, the kind of weird stroke of genius is that it's reaching out and pulling in all the Marvel movies and saying you're all part of this family, even though you live in the void because nobody likes you. We're all in the void together. That's the genius of this movie. That's where take all the tabloid inside jokes and throw them out, and this movie is it's its own brand of genius so far as Marvel goes. And all you need to do is have seen all those movies, which is no different from any other MCU thing. And that's where,
Sure.
your arguments I cut in half, where anything having to do with the Marvel universe at large, not just the MCU, but everything, this movie kind of ropes that in and ties those loose ends. All the behind the scenes meta, Disney versus Fox, this person didn't like this person behind the scenes stuff is that stuff is not timeless, and you and I agree. I don't like that stuff either. But just finishing off the list, it's fun as hell. And then you get to Dune, which is like, okay, this amazingly put together film, but I'm personally apathetic towards it. It's hard to care. And then Trap, which is a really, really unique and kind of awesome movie for an hour, and then gets real dumb real quick.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to do next? Bike riders?
Hey, wait, out there, really quick. How many out there? Who's near a blue door? Who knows of a broken lion? Okay, who can go to the blue door?
Did you get my message on that?
Who can go to the blue door?
How even that scene, like that scene, just from like a brief understanding what's going on in your movie at that given time, M. Night decided to go into the bathroom with the pop star who we don't know anything about other than the serial killer just exposed himself to her. Meanwhile, the more interesting thing going on at that moment in Trap would have been to stay outside the bathroom door as Cooper's family is screaming at him, and he's trying to get in there, and then maybe his daughter's looking at her phone going, "Oh my God, she's Lady Raven is live streaming right now," and we hear her talking about throwing out clues and figuring out where this guy that's going to die is. That's automatically more interesting. Again, without opening up that can of worms, it's like M. Night just needs somebody to direct his movies other than him, and he just needs to write. So that's why he's at the bottom, because he can't help himself. But he
can't help himself. He is his own worst enemy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, so you're gonna go try to watch some other movies.
I think I'll watch Bike Riders, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, check out Bike Riders. I went and saw a bunch of movies in like the last week, so I'm like, I went and saw Cuckoo last night. So if you want to see Cuckoo, we can talk about that too.
All I can think of is Blofeld when you say Cuckoo.
It is it's funny you mentioned that, because I think the way that in which they reference Cuckoo and Spectre is similar to what they do in this movie, because it wasn't what the movie was not what I was expecting as far as what the horror.
Well, again, let me reiterate to you. We don't need to watch 50 movies. Just come at me. Hey, I found a really good movie that I think you might love or hate, and let's talk about it. And just give me homework assignments, and I will do so. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep editing No Time to Die and slowly going insane.
Okay. All right. Well, go watch Bike Riders then for now.
All right.
But and maybe go watch Dee Dee. Maybe I'm curious what your thoughts on Dee Dee would be as well.
Okay. So let's wrap up here. Obviously, Ryan Reynolds, the guy went through hell and back to make just a. You have Endgame, which is like this, call it a masterpiece of superhero-dom. And then you have Deadpool doing the Abbott and Costello thing, but doing it incredibly well, regardless of some jokes that, you and I don't appreciate. He managed to do his own thing after being crapped on for a long time through the whole Marveldom. So I don't know if you have a drink, but
I am out of coffee.
Just pretend. Why do you have to tell people? Just let them believe that it's real.
Oh, like our friendship?
to Ryan Reynolds.
To Ryan Reynolds.
And of course, Hugh Jackman, but he already gets enough praise. So, all right, see you, dude.